Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast. I am, as ever, your host, Dr. Daniel Crosby. We are here at Future Proof, live from the main ocean stage. It's wonderful to be here in Huntington Beach with you all today. I am joined today by someone I'm very excited to speak with, my good friend, one of the deepest thinkers I know, one of the deepest feelers I know, an exciting voice in the world of human-first advice. Welcome to the show, Breanna Blaney.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah.
Excited to be here.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Bringing the energy on the last day.
Yeah. Bring that energy on the last day. I love speaking on the last day because these are the true these are the stalwarts. These are the real ones. Yeah. Throw it up there. Okay, but let's get into the good stuff, Bree. Let's get into the good stuff. You work for an asset manager. This is not the first entity that I would think of when we think of someone who would sponsor a program like Life Invested. What does Dimensional see about the future of the industry that you've seen fit to invest in something like this?
So Life Invested is a platform that we've been building at Dimensional that's all about the intersection of life and investing. And it's really based on this thesis that you actually know more about investing than you think you do just by living your life. That sensible life principles are sensible investing principles. Things like tuning out the noise, controlling what you can control, trying to plan, not predict, all of things in really that bucket. And so we primarily work with financial advisors to really help you all think about how do you have conversations with your clients that are more relatable and that help them really focus on what matters, which is ultimately living life. And so as an asset manager, Dimensional, we've been around for over 40 years, and we are really based on this philosophy that we want to change the way the world feels about investing so that people can not only invest better, but live better. And so that's really been at the heart of the work that we've been doing for the past 40 years. And I think that there's this recognition that as an industry, we have come such a long way. There's probably never been a better time to actually be an investor. Costs are much lower. It's much more easy to get access to investment solutions, to investment advice. Yet, I think the question we have to ask ourselves is our investors actually getting the returns that they deserve? Are they actually getting the experience that they deserve? And so some of you may be familiar with the Dalbar study. Every year, they look at the average equity return for investors versus the S&P 500. And not saying necessarily S&P 500 is the right benchmark, but year over year, they see 2 to 3% less than the average investor is getting 2 to 3% less than the S&P 500. So what does that indicate? Well, they're probably getting in and out of the market. There's a behavioral component there. And we also see the American Psychological Association cites stress, financial stress, as the number is in the top 1 to 2 reasons why people are so stressed. And so those are some indications that there's an opportunity for us as financial professionals, as an asset manager, to actually create better outcomes for clients. And that's what we're really passionate about doing at Dimensional with Life Invested.
Yeah, a couple of things that I love about that approach is, first of all, the empowerment, right? I think our industry, if we're going to be candid for a minute, we have taken a stance of disempowerment, making people feel small or incapable. Even behavioral finance has been used for that purpose, right? You're biased, you're stupid, you're irrational. So even these pieces of our industry that should have been helping have been hurting. I love that stance of empowerment. To the emotional piece, in my book, The Behavioral Investor, one of my favorite pieces in there, fMRI studies, so brain scan studies that were done on folks, they showed them a variety of different stimuli, all the stuff you can't talk about at a party, sex, death, religion, politics, and they measured the excitatory power of these things. Money had more power to excite the mind than sex, death, politics, religion, any of these things. Money is inherently emotional, and it's time we owned that and acted like it. For my second question, if you look back over a timeline of what we as an industry have emphasized, if you go back far enough, it was about access. Like, you can't do this without us, right? And then you fast forward a while, and it was about performance. Well, sure, you can trade on your own, but you can't get the returns that we can get you. That has proven by and large to not be an enduring, successful model. And so now we're in this world of human first, and this conference, I think, is leading the way in preaching this gospel of human first advice, if I'm a cynic, what's to make me think this isn't just the next stop along the line and that it'll be something else 10, 20 years from now? Why do you think human first has the power to endure?
In many ways, I think this has been an evolution, but I think of it as almost a returning to what makes us human. If you think about human connection and what ultimately drives us as human beings, we have always, pretty much since the beginning of time, had a desire to have deep, meaningful connections with one another. And I think that our industry in some ways has actually taken us away from that with the modern world and with money. And so this is almost a returning to what is actually very innate to us. And that is, I think, why this is going to really be here to stay, is because of that. And as our industry has evolved, I mean, all of us, Future Proof is a huge example of this. I think most advisors that are probably listening to this have been a part of championing a more human-centric approach and one that has worked with more financial planning. But when you think about 40 years ago, before Dimensional was founded, we were in more of a sales-centric model where we were, clients were getting charged, there's commissions being there, and there was much more, the client wasn't necessarily at the center of the equation. And so that is really, I think, the shift that we're seeing is how do you put the client in the center of the equation, and how do you help them build a philosophy that they can ultimately stick with, an enduring philosophy. And that's a huge, I'd say, unique piece of Dimensional, is that we've had one philosophy throughout this entire time. One philosophy, a belief in markets, a belief in human beings. And that's ultimately what you're doing when you're investing in the stock market, is you're investing in the human ingenuity of you, of me, of all of us to actually create better solutions for people. And so if you believe in human ingenuity, if you believe in the power of human connection, then ultimately you believe in markets.
One of the things that I love about Future Proof, first of all, that it's a family reunion. That's my favorite thing about this event. But I also love the conversations that I have here. And one of the hardest, but I think most important questions that was posed to me during my time here was, I had a gentleman come up to me and say, look, I think I love this human-centric, human-first advice thing, but I'm not sure I know what the hell it is, right? I'm not sure I grasp what it is. And that question was immediately resonant with me, because I thought, yes, there's a great deal of enthusiasm around this construct, right? There's a groundswell of enthusiasm for this, but I'm not sure there's always a lot of definitional clarity around what it is and what it looks like. What do you think about that? Can you help us put some form to that?
In one way, it's actually an advantage, I think, to all of you as advisors, that there's not this clear definition of this is exactly what it is. I think it's an opportunity for you all to differentiate your practices in many ways as the industry becomes more homogeneous, and that there's more, it becomes harder to differentiate because you're offering very similar services. This is a huge opportunity to be able to do that, and it's been fun even here, talking with many of you and seeing how you're beginning to implement this in your own practice. You think about Buckingham, they have Design, Build, Protect, or Mission Wealth. Seth was talking about the other day about the 12 dimensions of wealth. So there are these different kind of ways that advisory firms are putting this into practice to actually speak to their clients. From our perspective at Dimensional, I think when we think about human-centric advice, it really comes back to this idea of meeting people where they are. How are you speaking to them in a language that actually resonates with them? How are you using words that are easy to understand, and getting rid of all of the investment jargon and coming back to the basics, that if you've lived your life, you've dealt with uncertainty in your life. All of us have experiences and times that we've dealt with uncertainty. Markets are inherently uncertain. If you ask me, when's a time in my life that I've dealt with uncertainty, and ask me the principles that I had to navigate to cope with that uncertainty, things like controlling what I can control, being flexible along the way, those principles are the same principles that are fundamental to our investment approach. So much of the conversation can be started by actually reshaping that conversation so that you're not having to use this really technical terminology, that you're drawing those parallels. Another helpful framework, if you're thinking about this in your practice, may be to really think about how you put, your client back in the center of the equation, thinking about your people as people, helping them connect to their purpose, their why, then helping them think about how they're going to actually achieve that purpose through a philosophy or a mindset, and allowing that to inform the financial plan. And so, as many of you are probably already doing financial planning, those are some kind of additional steps you can add into your client experience, into your process, to really start changing and connecting with your clients in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts here. So I didn't have this question when my friend posed it to me, but upon further reflection, I love your framing of it as sort of an advantage, right? Because there's 350,000 advisors in this country, and they can all diversify a portfolio, right? Like in some ways, what makes you different is what makes you good. So we want to have some broad parameters around this, and I think the broad parameters for me are something like it needs to be informed by and in service of the science of human flourishing, because humans are messy, humans are strange, humans are weird, right? And education is not enough. You know, one of my favorite things to talk about is that nurses smoke cigarettes at twice the clip of the general population, right? If information were enough, we'd all be rich and have six-pack abs and all this, right? Information is simply not enough. So we need to help and understand how people process, how people take this stuff in, and how we can help them. I love what you said about purpose. One of the chapters in my new book, The Soul of Wealth, is all about purpose. I am on a deep study of purpose right now, and it almost feels like science fiction sometimes, how powerful it is. People who have purpose-based portfolios tend to have 15% more wealth than their peers in one study. They were 10 times less likely to go to cash in another study in tough markets, and they were 2 times as likely to save for retirement. We have to get better as an industry at ascertaining purpose and tying every decision back to that purpose. It's so magical. It is so powerful. And it leads to a different felt experience on the client's end. So we're here talking about all this stuff. It's easy for us to say, right? But these advisors are in the trenches every day. And the most common piece of pushback I get is, yeah, Crosby, this is good. I like it. Theoretically, it makes sense. But I am scared to death that I am going to open a Pandora's box of messy emotion, and I will never be able to put that, horse back in the barn. Like, it's going to get away from me. I'm not a trained psychologist. What do I do?
Money and investing, I think, are pretty messy by their inherent nature. If you think about your own money story or your own journey with investing, I am sure, raise of hands, how many of you have had emotions around money and investing? Maybe you felt stressed along the way. I think all of us have, right? It's a non-negotiable. And so that it's inherently there, regardless whether you want to open Pandora's box or not. It's an inherent part, I think, of working in our industry. So the invitation is how do you actually start to work with those emotions, address the fact that they're there, and then help people move through those emotions to actually have a better investment experience. And you talked about defining purpose and asking people, what does money mean to you? What does investing mean to you? Why are you investing in the first place? The way to actually start changing someone's mindset is to ask them then, what do you believe? What do you believe about markets? What do you believe about these things? And that's how you're going to really start to actually change someone's mindset around that.
I think back, there's a saying in psychology that feelings buried alive never die, right? So your clients' financial lives are emotional, irrespective of whether or not you touch on it, right? Whether or not you bring it up, the emotion is there. And to paraphrase Carl Jung, if I can get this right, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. We all have money stories. And in the same way that a fish doesn't know that it's wet, all of us have these money stories, right? That we inherited, usually in unspoken, unexamined ways. And it's only when we add some sunlight to that, right, that we're able to talk about it. And we can do that for our clients. So I think we're in agreement there that the messiness is there, whether or not you address it. Whether or not you address it, it will be made manifest in your clients' lives. And so I think it's a powerful thing to address it in an intentional way, rather than having it sort of creep up and pop up in places you might not like.
Yeah, we run an investor survey every year where we survey thousands of end investors, and we ask them, what's the number one thing that you value from your advisor? And the number one response year after year is peace of mind. You're instilling that peace of mind for clients. And so it inherently shows that your clients are really valuing that approach where you're helping them work through the mess to get out of that stress around money, bring them to more of that peace of mind. And when I reflect on my own personal experience around that, how have I actually helped shape my own money mindset? I didn't come into this in a way where I had never been stressed about money before, right? And I had to start to build a philosophy and a belief system to get through that mess. And Dimensional, in many ways, was the way that helped me do that. When you start to believe and to adopt a set of beliefs around markets that believe and trust in the markets that allow you to tune out the noise, you are able to then cultivate that more of your peace of mind and focus on what's really meaningful in life. So instead of worrying about the market headlines, instead of looking at my phone and getting these pings and thinking that I need to act on that, I can tune that out and I can redirect my focus on ensuring that I am moving my life in the direction that I actually want to go. And I think that that's really the value that you all can bring to your clients when you start to instill that change.
Yeah. For my last question, I'm a believer, again, trained as a psychotherapist. The most valuable part of my doctoral degree was having to we would tape our therapy sessions, and we would review tape the same way that athletes review tape, right? It's like nerd athletics. We would review tapes of our therapy sessions the same way an athlete would, and we would sit in groups of other doctoral trainees, and they would break down the tape, and they would say, pause, why did you say that there? Pause, why did you say that there? Why did you do that? Why did you ask that question? And I don't know if I've ever been more uncomfortable in my life. I was 23 when I started my doctoral program. I thought I knew everything. And that process was so good for me. There's not a ton, candidly, that I use in my everyday life with my clinical psychology training. But that, I feel like, informs everything I do. And it also informs the kind of husband, father, employee I am. Jason Zweig has this awesome piece of writing where he talks about how a lot of times we use behavioral finance as a window onto other people's behavior, but in fact, we should be using it as a mirror onto our own behavior, right? So Jason is saying, effectively, a lot of times, if you think about the early days of behavioral finance, it was, aren't our clients stupid? Don't they make so many mistakes? Aren't they irrational? Ha ha, how silly we are as a human race. And I think we've progressed far past that now. You're one of the most reflective and thoughtful people I know. As someone who gives so much thought to self-work, call it, and self-reflection, what advice do you have for advisors who want to use the things that we're learning here as a window onto self-improvement?
I think you have to eat your own cooking. And that's ultimately what builds trust. All of us are in the business of sales to some degree, whether you're selling yourself or you're selling your product, you're selling your services. And trust is the ultimate form of sales. And so when you can align yourself and what you believe and eat your own cooking and show up in a very authentic way, that's going to be reflected in what you're selling to that other person. And so the first thing is first, if you're looking and exploring kind of these new avenues, or you're trying to cultivate peace of mind for your clients around money, I don't think it means that you have to be zen around your own money 24/7, but it does mean that you have to be believing and have a philosophy that you actually stick with. And that's something that I feel really passionate about in my own life. I'm 100% invested in dimensional products because I actually believe in what I am selling with them. And the philosophy that we believe at Dimensional, a lot of those principles that I listed out earlier, are the same principles that I live my life by. For example, I don't believe that I can predict what's going to happen in my life. So I couldn't sell something where I was predicting what was going to happen in markets. That would feel out of alignment and kind of that misalignment state there. And the same thing, I think it's true when you're talking in the weeds about someone's money mindset or the way that they have gone through their own experience with money. If you haven't unpacked that for yourself and you haven't asked yourself those questions around what does money mean to me, what's my earliest money memory, then I think it's hard for you to go into a client meeting and ask the same thing of your clients. We run these conversation circles at Dimensional, particularly within our women and wealth community, but we've done it with men as well, where we'll actually sit in a circle and have conversations around money. And one of the primary ones we probably do most frequently is around your earliest money memory. And I have probably done 50 plus of these conversation circles. And I'm leading them, but I still answer the questions myself in the circle with other advisors, with clients. And it has been fascinating to me how much I have learned about myself through these conversations. Every single one, even though we're asking the same questions often, I'm getting insights around my own behavior around money. For example, my parents got divorced when I was a teenager, and there was this sense of control around money, that money felt like this thing that was almost controlling our decisions as a family. And so I vowed that I never wanted money to control me. And I realized early in my career, when I had started off in finance, that I was kind of making bad decisions around money in some ways because I was trying to rebel against this thing because I didn't want it to control me. And it's just fascinating how these experiences that we have early on in our childhood, how that can impact your money mindset, but also investing. And I have very similar stories on the investing side around how my parents invested and how you take that on. And so all of that is so relevant for you as a financial advisor to understand about yourself and how you function, and ultimately a very powerful tool when you're communicating with your own clients about their own experience.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. One of the things that I wrote about in The Soul of Wealth that I found in my research for the book that I found so compelling, which is people who go to therapy make about 10% more per year than their same education peers. And people who have a mentor make a great deal more than their same education peers. There's just something to be said for this process. I'm also a huge believer. Every therapist, when you're going through training to be a clinician, every therapist has to have their own therapist. And if we believe, as I think many of the people in this audience do, that the behavioral piece, that the human piece is the most additive piece, we should have our own advisors. Like I have my own advisor, and it's not because I need help picking out an ETF, right? I have my own advisor. When you look at the reason that clients don't come to see an advisor, it's because they feel condescended to, they feel judged, they feel looked down on. That's the number one fear of people who are going to seek out an advisor. And I think it's good for us to be on the other side of the table, to know what that's like, and to seek the kind of empowerment and to minimize the power differential that exists in that room, as you talked about at the beginning of the show. Bree, you're incredible. If people want to learn more about your work and more about what you're up to, where can they find you?
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Would absolutely love to chat with you. And then you can visit us.dimensional.com. That's our website. We have a host of resources on there for advisors, articles around life invested. And yeah, that's a great place to get in touch with us. And thanks again so much for the time, Daniel. Huge fan of your work and incredible human being. And I think that's a really special thing about our industry, and particularly at Future Proof, is that we get to have this human-to-human connection with each other, and been a big highlight for me. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you. Future Proof, a round of applause for Bree.